Hello and welcome to the IPControl 16 evaluation series. And I thought I would jump into the cloud automation appliance while we're talking about APIs and try to create one of the workflows that we're working on, the example with the site, and see if we can kind of wire these all together to make it work. And I'm going to see what happens here. I'm going to see if we can do this in the video. I need to do it within 30 minutes with this recording. So we'll see how that works out here. All right, so we have basically nothing going on here in this particular interface. And so what I want to do, and let me just kind of cover this, so we're going to come back to this anyway. The way that the Node-RED interface is kind of laid out first is you have this left-hand panel of what we'll call nodes. This is based on Node.js, and there are common and built-in nodes that perform various functions that you wire into your workflow together, and it performs that particular function, such as an HTTP end node, which would be a new input or endpoint for an API to create a new API, a request to make an outbound request to another external API or service, and then a response. So those type network functions would all work in that regard. So they have other things here like splitting arrays, joining them back together so that you can modify data. You can parse out data in different formats, CSV, HTML, and JSON. But effectively, we have some built-in nodes that we built. IPC is IP control. And then you have also the QIP nodes that were included in this version. So QIP is the second DDI solution. And then we have AWS and Azure interfaces for describing the VNets and describing the instances or IPs in that environment. So I think what I want to try to do here is I want to see about doing basically what we did with the Postman, where we had set up the addSite or the cloneContainer in the addSite. So I want to effectively set up a new API that I can invoke, passing a simple data string, and let it handle all of the rest of the input and details on how to do that. So to begin with, and kind of remembering back what we had done with that, we had specifically, this says it can't load for some reason, great. But we had the addSite, and then we had the cloneContainer. So those particular APIs. And what we need to do here is because I don't have an API for those particular APIs. So we're going to create our own, and I'm going to show you how this is done here. So I'm going to kind of go over this kind of quickly, and hopefully you'll be able to keep up with me here. So I'm going to drag a bunch of nodes onto this interface real quick that I'm going to use. Timestamp, which I'm going to use to inject. We're going to kind of test it locally, and then we'll be able to test it remotely. I also need a response node so that I can respond back. And we're going to do then some IPC login. So we need to be able to do that to get our user login. And then we're going to effectively, once we log in and get our token, we're going to run a couple of different commands and APIs that we're going to manually do. So we're going to have to create a couple of these out here. So I'm going to have to move some of this around. Let's put a switch out here. Okay. Test our login. And that one we've already got. Meant to drag another request. Okay. So let's do two things here. First, let's do add new site as the name. So when we look at the details for the endpoints, and this is the greatest thing about the rapid deployment of these new APIs and Node-RED in general, is that you can take the HTTP input node and just simply add a URL to it, which in our case becomes /workflow/add new site, and that becomes the API that is consumed by the calling client, by Postman or anything else that we're going to use. So we'll do add new site, and it's going to be a post type, which we're going to allow into here. And then we're going to add a change node just so I can back up all the details before we modify it. Wire that together. So usually on an input-output node, the left hand is the input, right side is the output. This is only an input, so it only has one direction, which is the output. But the message comes in, then goes out, and then everything else should be ready to go from there. So in this payload, then I want to do set payload. Let's just do, back up to the message payload. And this way, if we want to manipulate it, we have the original, and we can decopy this too if we want to. All right, and what else we need to do here? And then we want to effectively call in the login. And the login here, when you first define it, you need to set a service. And on the CAA, we set up the executive. So we use the local service itself. But the important part here is that we need to basically route this or tell it where in IPControl do you want to start looking at data. So I'm going to go out here real quick and take a look at this. Actually, we're on our system here. Okay, so it defaults to in control, which is fine here, but we could say that this particular CAA supports, say, organization A, or if it does support organization B, or if you want to allow and break it down even further. So we could say that even that when we do work in a lab environment with this CAA, all of the details start here at Southeast. So any queries from that, this becomes the root of where we define the node. Now I'm going to leave it at the root at the highest level, but if I get down into cloud and some other things, we may pull this down into a cloud container to be sure of that. Now when you do the update here and do done, I'm not going to deploy yet, but when we deploy that, this will update all of the nodes relative to the IPC login. Right? So what we would then want to look at here is we can then take a look at the headers, and we should get a 200. So if we get message payload, actually we want to look at status code, and we'll say is, and here you have values, so we can do different types of checks and balances. So if I wanted to use another message property, compare the flow, which is a global context, flow context, global context. I can do strings, numbers. We can also do expressions, which are JSON-ATA ability to take some functions and aggregate and substrings and other functions to build the JSON string. We're not going to do that here. We're just going to do 200. But we could do that, within a range. If it's here, do this. And then we could say otherwise, if we just want to catch all, go here. But we could catch other errors. We could say 400, 401, 402, 500. We could pull those out of there as well. Now, one thing that we will put on this is we'll put a catch node out here, just so that we have a response. Maybe we'll put it up here by the debug. Let's put this out here as a debug as well. And we'll just call this login debug. Now, the one thing about the debug is you can output the payload entirely, which we call a complete message object. And when you're testing input where you need to access properties outside of message payload, this is how you would do that. Otherwise, it's only showing you what would be sent out to the next node in the payload, which is then going to be processed. Now here you can also, I can do these things too, which I'd like to do now in this new version, and just simply create a little node, make it easier to work with, that I can then switch on and off. And so we have the login here, we have our request node. I'm going to go ahead and just do this. And let's just do select nodes just for the login, to debug. And in the output here, I'm going to show this. And the output of the debug, just for now, we might just want to respond to it. But here, if we do otherwise, so here we might want to say login failed. And if it does succeed, we're going to go down and get into this section. And that's where we're going to output 200. And we're going to do something with this here. And let's just put a node here. Tell you what, instead of doing that, let's just copy and paste, so we don't have to go through all those attributes. And wire this node in. And that's effectively all I want to do right now. So you need to deploy this to make sure, and then I'm going to look in the debug just to see what we're doing with this. I forgot to wire this into it. Okay, so what we need to put into this then is we need to input JSON. We need to go to the editor, And we need to structure this to be effectively for the login, the username. I'm going to use my Ink admin. However, you would likely have a service admin account that you would use for this. And since we're not doing anything else right now, I just want to test the login. And one other note, stop to do this here. In the login node, we typically want to put this into a different property other than credentials so that it doesn't overwrite the input, which might have additional properties that need to be processed by the other nodes. So I just want to inject that there. Let's go ahead and hit submit. All right, and now when we highlight the object here, you'll notice, I don't know if you can notice over here, but this node particularly, this shows you the node that is giving you the debug output. And if you click on it, you'll see it blinking on the canvas. And same thing up here, we see in the top, this is the first login node, and now it made out to the function node. So we know everything's flowing through. We know we got a username, password. We know we got a token. So now the next thing we need to do is we need to make a custom API call to the cloneContainer function. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to do two things and simplify this. And one is I'm going to use a template node. And we're going to say the first thing that we do here when this comes out of this function is we're going to create a template node, which we're going to use to be our cloneContainer. And in this, we'll double click this. We'll say this is parse JSON. And this uses mustache syntax to overwrite these values. So what we're going to do here then is we'll specify the name. So we'll call it the variables and pass those in, and then we'll fill this template in dynamically based on the input. So let's just do, parent name. Actually, let's not. Let's do, we're going to have to save these attributes. What do we want them to pass this in? So let's do parent. Yeah, we'll just do parent name. We want to do new name. And lastly, this is the one to clone. And I'm just going to leave that there because that's the one I want to clone all the time. Unless I go down to a state. Now, if I do this more logic, we may say that we want to build some logic to pick which container, and then we would just choose 0001 being the template. So we could certainly do that in this regard. But I'm going to use this as a template, and this will output that. Now, up here, what we're going to do, and because this is going to be the payload, we don't really need to do this in a function. We can just call in those parameters. So again, we had parent name and new name. So up in this, actually we just pass all that in there. We should be able to pull that, and then let's go to this. Let's just test it. Actually, here we do need to set this. So we need to create a header for our function here. So we need to do var headers. And then we'll do headers dot authorization. Actually, I need to do one more thing here. Let's do var credentials. All right, so then we need the headers. We need authorization, error, and we need that token there. So let's see if this will do that. And let's just check and see what it looks like there, just to see. We may have to change that around in that substitution. interpolation there. Okay, so I need to do that. So let's go here, and we'll just do cjson dot access token. Let's try that. It would not be able to parse my string here, so I'm going to do one more thing. After that, instead of doing it in the node, which I thought that would do, let's just go ahead and convert it. And we'll do message credentials. All right, let's see what happens with this one now. We should get some different output. Okay, so now we have this object. So now what we need to do here, which I was trying to do, and I probably was not setting it right, is I need to create headers. And in the headers, I need to set the authorization bearer, and I need to be able to bring in these credentials. So what I'm going to do here, then, since we've already converted this, is we're going to do, I'm going to simplify this. Let's just do access token, a token equals message credentials, access token. All right, and that should bring that in. And then we want to basically get rid of this, and we just want to say access token, a token. All right, and we're going to add that in, and that should give us a header. So let's take a look and see what that looks like then. And if that works right, we should be able to go ahead and do our template and then move on. Okay, so it did pass it through. So here's what we would have then. Let's go up to this node. Actually, we want to go down to this node. So let's do this. Since we're making it here, let's see what our output looks like here. Let's get rid of that for a second. This is how I debug it. This is how we walk through some of this. If you haven't really sat down and thought this out, this is kind of what I'm trying to do here. So, all right, so we didn't put anything in our values. So now I want to go up here. And this is what we're going to suggest that our input to our user or post or process is. So now I'm going to do parent name. And this needs to be lowercase, parent name. And this is going to be demo. And now we're going to go new container name. And this will be demo first CAA workflow. First CAA. All right, we'll just call it like that, something like that. All right, and that should be our last parameter. We shouldn't need anything else. Now we can also set a topic, which is of interest here, that if you wanted to track this message all the way through, you could set up a topic that this is add new site. And that will get carried with the all of the messages effectively that you can then parse out and see what that might look like. So now you'll see here a topic. That didn't pull that in there for us though. So let's take a look at what we have. So now we should have, and that's probably why. So in our template, this should mostly read payload.parent name, and let's do payload.new name. Otherwise, it's looking for the message value. Let's see what we get here. Okay, we got the parent. We didn't get the new container name. Let's make sure I got that spelled right. No, I do not. So case sensitivity is critical. And that should do it. So let's see. This should give us what we need here. All right. And now we should have No, I still didn't pull our new container name in. I probably didn't spell it right here. Ah, okay. Last time. Okay. Now that should be the syntax and all we need effectively to invoke that clone. So what we want to do now that we know that this template is filling in these values dynamically based on the input, we can now go out here to this request and put in our end node. So the API for this, then we need to pull back the details specifically for the clone container. So I'm going to copy this over and let's do this. I'm going to change it to our local system and see if we can get everything working there. 10.10.0.2. And actually I can make this 5 being itself because it does have its own, and we're going to config. Now we don't have a TLS at this point, and we're not doing any type of server verification. So you want to enable it but disable it so that we're going to ignore those server values. Now I know when we do this clone that it's just a string, but we can tell it to create a parsed object anyway, and that'll create an array, which will be an array of a string effectively. And I don't think we need anything else here, so we'll just go ahead and do done. Let's go ahead and wire this together. Let's copy this debug node. And just so we can, this won't actually have a response here, but this will be our response for it. So this should tell us if we're going to get this clone. And we'll go out here and let's just go ahead and do a couple things to verify it. And actually, I don't have demo under there, so I need to see what we're going to do here. Okay, and what we need to do here then is I need to structure, again, back to my policies, back to my container to make sure that I have everything set up so that when I make a request in with the simple commands that I'm going to get back the expected result. So what I've done, and I had to do this in the video just to make sure it worked. I didn't want to waste any more time on that. I created a parent container. I put this under organization A, and this is where I'm going to work with this. But this could have been under any one of these sites. I just happen to put it here. In this particular one, I'm going to go ahead and set the containers here, but I'm only going to allow the region. So this will be my new regional area, like Southeast is. This would be equivalent to it up here, which also means that if I built like a 10 net here in Southeast or another private net, and I wanted to overlap it, I could. So demo could be overlap, Midwest overlap, Southeast overlap. I'd have to move the subnets down, but that would be appropriate. Valid block types or device types you can set. I'm only doing region as the type of root here, just in case I need to create it locally. I'm not doing anything else elsewhere, so I'm not going up anywhere to find space. It's all going to be set up there. And when I go down to the network, and I'm going to do this anyway, which will allow for private. So we're going to allow for private for, I'm sorry, we're not going to allow for root here. We're going to have it go up and look for private, because that's what should be defined at the organization level. Okay, and then our block type information templates, this is a network level, so it's only UDF, and we'll submit it. Then we're going to have our demo 00001, which will be our clone container. This is our template. Anything I wanted to put in this particular region, or values, notes, etc., would be cloned moving forward. The valid block types are going to be our subnets that are going to be at the site level. So this is a site like ATL would be a site. The allow allocation from parent should only allow the region, and then we have the subnet UDS on the different types. So now with this structure then, I expect that when we create this, and we're going to pass in this new value, so we'll have demo as the parent name. We're still going to have our container set here. And then our template is always going to be hard coded to be demo 001. And I could, of course, make that a variable as well. So based on that, I should get a value. And let's go ahead and run that. Now that ran a little bit longer. We should see, yep, status code 200. And we'll see here that we have our string created it. Great. And that's what we wanted to see. And now we should see our site. Okay, so that's perfect. That's what we want. So now what we really want to do here, once we've done this request, we want to then do a switch again. And we want to basically say that if it succeeded, let's go ahead and create the site template. So we want to look for status code. And we want to go to equals 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 200. And if we got here any other way, other than going through the checks and other balances, we can tell it to reroute back out to the response node where we'll tell it there's an error. So we're going to go down and run through this. 200 will go here, and then what we want to do is we want to build another template effectively. Let's do 200 here. Let's wire this together. This we'll send up here just so we can see the error. And in the strike that over there. Okay, now in this template, we need to have the addSite template, which again is that real simple value here. And this needs to match, there you go, what we have in the system. So I need to go in and make sure I have a template named demo site small, which I do not, and I'm going to need to modify that. So let's go take a look at it. Site allocation templates, we have small hyphen branch. So this then needs to be small hyphen branch. And then the container name, this would be the new container name. So we could do payload new container name, since that's going to be the same one that we're looking into. And let's save that. Let's go back over here to this post. And this is the addSite post, which we're going to copy and paste over here. Change our URL. And again, this is those two sites. So this is the add, and we're going to enable this, select our existing. And this output, when we add the site, is going to be a string value as well. So we'll just keep that there. And then here, since this is going to be a string, we need to do one thing. We need to put a change node in here. And all we need in this particular one is we need message payload new container name to read message backup new container name, because these are backed up when we set that, so we can just reuse that. And this is another reason why you might want to do that, so that you can copy these, use them later in their template. So now we've got that set. We pull in the template name here. This is then going to be set and will become our new payload, which will then call this addSite. And what we expect to occur is that output of the array of subnets, which we hope to see here. So let's do two things. Let's go back and clean this up so we can rerun this. And we need to delete it. All right. And let's go ahead and just run this and see how we get all the way down. Okay, so we did make it down to the clone. Status code. Oh, goodness. Okay. This needs to be a number 200. Clean this up one more time. At least we know that works well. But we didn't get past our 200 code, so that's where that failed. So let's do it one more time. And this one made it all the way down. Now we got a 401 here, so let's find out why we did here. And cannot set property of non-property type. Where is this? Okay. So our payload up here is just a string. Set message payload. Let's do one more thing here. Maybe there isn't a payload per se, maybe it's empty. So we're going to do JSON empty, then we'll set the value message payload dot new container name. Actually, I think we need to do this. Container name, and we'll set this to message backup new container name. Now, one thing about this too is we could go down here. There's a couple of buttons. One shows you the path, one shows you the value, and then the other shows you the pin it. So we could copy that there, and we could say that, and that would copy it into the value. So let's try this again. Let's make sure I've got my variables structure set up right. And one more time. And this is where we might want to set up something that will clean up after us as we do this. All right, one more time here. Let's try this. And let's kind of see if we can get it all running and wrap it all together. Still got 401. Let's see what we have here. Now we need to put some debug. I need to find out what's happening down here. We know this works. So we need to change two rules. Equals 200. Otherwise, let's just put a debug up there. So I'm going to start with a new payload. I'm going to set new container name, backup new container name. Let's just try this. But when it gets down to the template, payload, new container name, small branch, site, paste. Okay. Well, that looks like that should be right to me. And so I want to see what we have right here. And let's see if we get this far. We may still have some status codes in there that we have to reset. Had to keep doing this. And this is the pain of not planning this ahead of time and trying to demo it on the fly. But this is, again, how we would go through it. And it's really not that difficult once you understand the basics of it there. But now getting to this point here, what do we have that we're building? What do we build out here? So I have site, first demo, demo-first-CAA, demo-first-CAA. And let's just go in here and double check something. Let's make sure that we can even apply the template. Small branch. Let's make sure it works. All right, that seems to work right. Okay. So now what I want to do here, I'm going to delete this one more time. Let's look at our messages when they get down here. I'm going to take this off for a second. And let's just create it and see what it looks like when we get down to the template. Let's make sure we don't have anything in here that's constructor. Yeah, so there it is. So we need to take those nodes out again. So we can do it here. We can do delete, and we'll do status code so that we know that it can go through. And I think that's all we need to do, actually, other than delete this again and try it again. All right, let's wire this guy back up in this. Try it again. Still got 401 for some reason, but let's see what else we have. maybe our headers. No, our headers didn't make it back over here. So we need to recreate those headers again. That's what it is. So where do I want to copy that? Let me do this. This should have been under message. Okay. And delete. I am going to put a flow in there that's going to clean this up. And let's try one more time. And that looks a little bit better. Longer request there. And then, yeah, perfect. So it was effectively that we need to recreate the header. So when this structure goes through and it builds all these messages, and if it recreates that, it may overwrite some of these. And so you may miss some of this data. And you may have to recreate it like I just did. So now we should effectively have our container that we built, and we should have our subnets. And that's it. And effectively that then we can make an API out of, and let's do that, which we did. And let's call it, let's remove this again. I just like to use the same syntax so I know it works. And let's remove this one more time. And now let's go back over to our postman. All right, and with this postman then, we want to go ahead and add our new container. We're going to use the DC site. This, make sure all of this is running here, and let's just go ahead and hit commit. And I hope that we should see just our 3 subnets come back, and it looks like we have. So these are the 3 subnets that were allocated, and we refresh, we should see our site allocation. And so that is, in effect, just a simple way, one way I'm going to say that we can create custom APIs, quick endpoints to take these multiple tasks, wrap them together into a single workflow with a single endpoint and output, and greatly simplify the whole process. So that's what I wanted to share today with the cloud automation. And this is not how I want to start the cloud automation appliance discussion. And I'm going to go back and cover this for more of a basic start, going over the simple workflows and then getting into more of the advanced. But since we were already on the APIs, this being an advanced topic, moving that into the cloud automation appliance so that we can simplify that process. And that's it. Thank you for joining again, and look forward to joining the next video. Take care.